Most people are afraid of coming home to an empty house. I came home early that Tuesday, and for the first time in my life, I wished the place had been empty. My flight from Denver landed before noon. The conference had wrapped a day ahead of schedule after some keynote speaker backed out with a family emergency, which is corporate America's way of saying nobody really knows what happened, but everybody nods respectfully and heads for the airport. I didn't call home, didn't text. I thought I'd surprise Cassandra, maybe swing by that little Thai place she likes near Maple Avenue, bring home drunken noodles, eat at our own kitchen table like two civilized adults for once. I turned onto our street feeling almost cheerful. Then I saw Preston's car in the driveway. That alone made me slow down. My son was 26, married, living across town in an apartment I had helped furnish down to the bar stools and coffee table. He was not the kind of person who just stopped by in the middle of a weekday. Not unless he needed something, and even then he usually called first. I sat there with the engine running, one hand still on the wheel, looking at his car like it might explain itself. It didn't. So I grabbed my carry-on, walked up the front path, and noticed the second thing. Silence. Not the good kind. Not afternoon nap silence or TV murmuring in the other room silence. This was thick, pressed down, the kind that makes you feel like you've opened the wrong door in your own life. I stepped inside and found Preston and Lindsay sitting on the couch in the living room. No television, no phones, no movement. And when Preston looked up at me, he didn't flinch, not even a little. I said, "Where's your mother?" He cleared his throat and said, "Dad, Mom's at Mercy General." And the way he said it made my stomach turn. It didn't sound like bad news. It sounded like something already decided. Let me tell you something about being married to the same person for over 2 decades. You stop needing words for most things. After 23 years with Cassandra, I could tell what kind of day she'd had just by how hard she set her keys down on the kitchen counter. I knew when she was about to bring something up just by the way she wiped her hands on a dish towel that didn't need wiping. There are little signals you learn, patterns, rhythms. Marriage isn't built on the big moments people post about. It's built on 1,000 small, unremarkable habits that stack up over time until they become a kind of language. And Cassandra was not a quiet language. She had opinions about everything. The right shade of white for the kitchen cabinets, the proper way to load a dishwasher, which I've apparently been doing incorrectly since 2004. The fact that I insisted on keeping a drawer full of old phone chargers, just in case. She was sharp, organized, the kind of woman who planned Thanksgiving like a military operation and still had time to critique your pie crust. Fragile was never a word I would have used for her. As for Preston, well, we were fine. That's the word people use when they don't want to unpack something. He was a good kid growing up, smart, a little stubborn, always believed he could talk his way through anything. That part never really changed. As an adult, he'd drifted. Nothing dramatic, just distance. Fewer calls, shorter visits, conversations that felt like they had a timer on them. Still, he was my son. And I had done what fathers do, helped where I could, co-signed the lease when he and Lindsay moved into their place, bought them a couch they probably couldn't afford yet, told myself that was what building a life looked like for someone his age. So when I walked into my own living room and saw him sitting there, calm as a man waiting for a bus, and not surprised to see me when I was supposed to be in another state, that wasn't just unusual. That was wrong in a way I couldn't quite name yet, but I felt it. And I've learned over the years not to ignore that feeling, because every time I ever did, it cost me something. I don't remember the drive to Mercy General. I remember the traffic lights. I remember a red pickup cutting me off near the intersection by the old diner. I remember gripping the steering wheel hard enough that my fingers ached later. But I don't remember the actual distance between my house and that hospital. Shock does that. It edits things for you. By the time I got there, I was already moving too fast, straight past the front desk, past the gift shop with the balloons and stuffed animals that always feel out of place in a building like that. I asked for Cassandra Trevor, and a nurse pointed me toward the ICU like she'd done it 100 times that morning. Dr. Beverly Nash met me just outside the unit. She looked exactly like the kind of doctor you hope you get when things are serious. Mid-50s, steady eyes, no wasted movement, the kind of person who doesn't soften the truth but doesn't throw it at you either. "Mr. Trevor," she said, "I'm glad you made it." I said, "What's going on with my wife?" No small talk, no easing into it. She nodded once, like she appreciated that. "Your wife was brought in this morning," she said. She was disoriented, weak, showing signs of organ stress. We ran initial labs and her blood work is showing elevated toxicity levels. I stared at her for a second. Toxicity? I said. Like, what does that mean? It means, she said carefully, that there are substances in her system that shouldn't be there at those levels. We're still running a full panel, but I want to be clear with you. This doesn't look like a sudden illness. I felt something shift in my chest. What does it look like? She held my gaze. It looks like something that's been building over time. Building. That word stayed with me. I nodded because there wasn't anything else to do, and she led me into Cassandra's room. I've seen my wife in a lot of states over the years. I've seen her furious, laughing so hard she couldn't breathe, half asleep on the couch with a book sliding off her chest. I've seen her handle contractors, insurance agents, and family arguments with the same level of controlled intensity. I'd never seen her like that. She looked smaller, not physically exactly, but like something inside her had been turned down, dimmed. The machines were doing their quiet work, monitors blinking, IV line dripping steadily, and Cassandra, this woman who once chased a contractor out of our kitchen with a wooden spoon, lay there barely moving. I sat down beside her and took her hand. It felt lighter than it should have. I'm here, I said quietly, and I'm not leaving until I know what happened to you. She didn't respond, but I meant it. Because building doesn't happen by accident. It happens because something, or someone, keeps adding to it. When I stepped back into the waiting area, they were already there. Of course they were. Preston was standing near the vending machine, arms crossed like he was trying to decide between snacks he didn't actually want. Lindsay was sitting a few chairs away, back straight, hands folded over her lap, and her phone was face down. Now, I need you to understand something about Lindsay. That woman lives on her phone. I've seen her scroll through it during Thanksgiving grace. I once watched her check notifications while we were singing Happy Birthday. So a face-down phone wasn't just unusual, it was intentional. I sat across from them. No one spoke for a few seconds. Just the low hum of the vending machine and the muted television in the corner talking about weather somewhere none of us were paying attention to. Preston cleared his throat first. Dad, I know this looks bad. I leaned back slightly in the chair. Do you? I said. He blinked like he wasn't expecting that. Yeah, he said. I mean, Mom's been having some issues lately. We've been trying to help. We? I asked. Lindsay's been coming by in the mornings, he said quickly, making sure she eats, takes her vitamins, stays on track. I nodded once. Vitamins, I repeated. Yeah, he said. Which ones? That's all I asked, just that. Preston's mouth opened, then closed. He glanced sideways at Lindsay. Lindsay didn't look up. Her eyes stayed on her hands like the answer might be written there. It lasted maybe 3 seconds. But I've been alive long enough to know the difference between someone searching for a word and someone realizing they don't have one. I stood up. I'm going to need both of you to go home, I said. Preston straightened. Dad, hold on. Preston. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. There's a way a father says your name when the conversation is over. Mine used to do it to me, and I learned early not to test it. He stopped. Lindsay finally looked up, and for the first time since I'd walked in, I saw something real on her face. Not concern, not confusion, something tighter than that. I nodded toward the exit. Go home, I said. They didn't argue, and that was the second crack, because innocent people usually have a lot more to say. I didn't go after them. That's the part people always get wrong when they hear stories like this. They imagine shouting, accusations, a scene in a hospital hallway that security has to step in and break up. That's not how it works when something inside you clicks into place. I went back to my chair, sat down, picked up my phone, and I started thinking. The first call I made was to Kurt. Curtis Barnes has been in my life longer than most of my furniture. We met in '87, back when both of us still thought we were going to be something impressive, before life politely redirected us into more realistic versions of ourselves. He's the kind of man who doesn't panic, doesn't sugarcoat, and doesn't waste your time telling you what you want to hear. He picked up on the second ring. Warren? She's in the ICU, I said. They're saying toxicity, something that's been building. There was a pause. Not a long one. just long enough for him to line things up in his head. Building, he repeated. That's not random. I know. Another pause. Who's been around her? He asked. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the scuffed tile floor. And that's when it came back to me. 4 months ago, Cassandra had twisted her ankle coming down the stairs. Nothing dramatic, just a bad sprain. But it slowed her down, made mornings harder, getting breakfast together, keeping up with her usual routine. Preston had stepped in almost immediately, said Lindsay could come by in the mornings, help out, make sure Cassandra ate, took her supplements, stayed on schedule while I was at work. At the time, I thought it was generous. I remember telling Kurt, maybe I misjudged that boy. I closed my eyes for a second. I want to go back and slap myself, I said. Kurt didn't laugh. Warren, he said quietly, think about access. Not intentions. Access. I nodded even though he couldn't see it. Then I opened my banking app. Now, I'll be honest with you, I'm not a man who enjoys online banking. I still double-check every login like I'm about to get scammed by a teenager in another country. But numbers are numbers, and patterns don't care how comfortable you are. At first, nothing jumped out. Then I started looking closer. Small withdrawals, 200 here, 350 there. Amounts just low enough that you wouldn't question them if you were busy, tired, or trusting. I added them up, sat there in that hospital waiting room with bad coffee cooling beside me, and did the math twice just to be sure. Just under $11,000 over 5 months from an account Preston had limited access to. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I said it out loud, quietly, like I was testing how it sounded in the air. Someone's been practicing. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I sat there in that waiting room with a paper cup of coffee that tasted like regret and stared at my phone like it might rearrange the numbers into something less deliberate. Around 2 a.m., I called Kurt again. He picked up on the first ring this time. Tell me you found something else, he said. 11,000, I said. Small withdrawals, spread out, clean. There was a long exhale on the other end. That's not panic money, he said. That's planned. I know. Silence for a second, then more carefully. You sure it was Preston? I looked down at the screen again. The account permissions, the access logs, the pattern. I'm past sure, I said quietly. We hung up not long after that. There wasn't much left to say at that hour. The next morning, Dr. Nash found me in the same chair. Same position, actually. She sat down beside me this time, which told me before she even spoke that whatever she had to say mattered. The full panel came back, she said. I nodded once. Tell me straight. She didn't hesitate. Your wife has elevated levels of a compound consistent with long-term heavy metal exposure, the kind that doesn't show up overnight. This has been happening for months. Months, she continued. We've started treatment. Her kidneys are under stress, but she's responding. I want you to understand. We caught this in time. I closed my eyes for a second, just enough to steady myself. Then I opened them. If someone were doing this on purpose, I said, how would they do it? She studied me for half a heartbeat. Then she answered like a professional. It could be introduced through food, drinks, supplements. Powder-based compounds dissolve easily. No strong taste. Supplements. I heard Preston's voice in my head. Lindsay's been coming by every morning, said, making sure she takes her vitamins. I stood up so fast the chair scraped against the floor. I need to make a call, I said. I stepped into the hallway and pulled out my phone. First, the bank. Every account we had, locked, restructured, access removed, passwords changed, security flags added, anything Preston had even partial access to, gone. Then my attorney. Short conversation. Direct. I gave her just enough to get started. Within 20 minutes, my phone started buzzing. Preston? Again. And again. Then Lindsay. Then a text. Dad, what did you do? Why can't I access anything? Call me right now. I stared at that message, not at the words, at the tone, not confusion, not concern. Entitlement, like something that belonged to him had been taken away. I typed back one sentence. You should have thought about that before you touched my wife. I didn't send anything else. I put the phone in my pocket and leaned against the wall for a moment, letting the quiet settle. because by then, one thing was clear. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't panic. It wasn't even desperation. This was something else. And people don't do something this patient unless they're trying to get somewhere. I didn't have to wait long to find out where. Kurt called me just after sunrise the next morning, 7:14 a.m. I remember the exact time because I was watching the clock, counting minutes until they'd let me back into Cassandra's room. When my phone lit up, I picked it up before the first ring finished. He didn't say hello. "Warren," he said, "you need to sit down." I was already sitting. "Talk to me." There was a pause. Not hesitation, just the kind of pause a man takes when he's deciding how much of the truth to hand you at once. 6 weeks ago, he said, Cassandra met with an estate attorney. Alone. That didn't surprise me as much as it should have. Cassandra liked her surprises. Birthdays, anniversaries, she treated them like coordinated events. If she was doing something legal without telling me, it wasn't secrecy, it was staging. What did she change? I asked. Her life insurance policy. I leaned back slowly in the chair. Originally, Preston was listed as secondary beneficiary. Standard setup. That changed. How? I said. Kurt exhaled. She removed him. Completely. I closed my eyes for a second. And redirected everything into a charitable trust she's been building. Literacy programs, kids. It's been in the works for 2 years. That sounded exactly like her. Do the work quietly. Finish it completely. Then tell you when it's real. How much, I asked. Policy's worth about $2.3 million. The number just sat there for a second. Then I asked the only question that mattered. Does Preston know? Another pause. He called the attorney's office 3 weeks ago, Kurt said. Pretended to be Cassandra's assistant. Asked about the status of the changes. I stared straight ahead. 3 weeks ago. Dr. Nash had said the exposure had been happening for months. Processing window? I asked. 30 days, Kurt said. Paperwork hadn't finalized yet when she collapsed. 30 days. I did the math without meaning to. Cassandra had about a month left in someone else's plan. I sat there with that. Didn't speak, didn't move. Just let it settle. Because once you understand the reason, everything else rearranges itself. The withdrawals, the daily visits, the supplements, the timing. This wasn't about helping. This wasn't about money in the short term. This was about making sure Cassandra didn't live long enough to take something away. My son hadn't panicked. He hadn't snapped. He had sat down, thought it through, and made a decision. And then carried it out, slowly. I opened my eyes and said, he was waiting. Kurt didn't answer. He didn't have to. Because that's exactly what it was. My son wasn't trying to fix anything. He was waiting for my wife to die before she could change where the money went. I didn't call Preston. I didn't drive home and tear the house apart looking for something I could hold up like proof. I didn't confront Lindsay in a parking lot or demand answers in a voice loud enough for strangers to hear. I've seen men do that. It never ends well. What I did instead was slow down. Because once you know what you're dealing with, speed stops being useful. Precision takes over. I called my attorney, Margaret Holloway. If you've never met a person who genuinely enjoys watching consequences unfold, you've never met Margaret. 30 years in practice, voice like she's permanently unimpressed, and a way of asking questions that makes you realize you should have thought 3 steps ahead before opening your mouth. I told her everything, the hospital, the doctor's report, the withdrawals, the supplements, the insurance policy. She didn't interrupt, didn't react, just listened. When I finished, there was about 4 seconds of silence. Then she said, Warren, I need you to do exactly what I say. I'm listening. Do not confront them. Do not go back to that house and start looking for evidence. Do not warn them. Do not even hint that you know anything beyond what they already suspect. I can do that. I know you can, she said, because if you don't, we lose the advantage. That word stuck. Advantage. Give me 72 hours, she continued. I'll coordinate with someone your friend already looped in. We build this properly. Clean chain of evidence, no gaps, no room for interpretation. I want it airtight, I said. There was the faintest shift in her tone. Not softer, sharper. Warren, she said, by the time this lands, It won't just be airtight, it'll be unavoidable. We hung up. And for the next 3 days, I did something that felt almost unnatural. I waited. I sat with Cassandra while she slept. I answered nurses' questions. I drank bad coffee and watched the same daytime news loop over and over again, and underneath all of that, something in me went quiet, not empty, not numb, focused, because I wasn't interested in yelling. I wasn't interested in revenge. I was interested in making sure that when the truth hit, it didn't bruise. It broke something they couldn't put back together. They came back on the 5th day, together, carrying flowers. I saw them before they saw me, stepping off the elevator like they were walking into a routine visit instead of a situation they had carefully engineered over months. Preston had that same expression he'd worn the first day, controlled, measured, like he was still operating under the assumption that he could manage this. Lindsay stayed half a step behind him, always just behind. Preston spotted me in the hallway and adjusted immediately, shoulders relaxed, face softened, the version of himself he used when he wanted something. "Dad," he said, walking toward me, holding the flowers out slightly. "How is she?" "She's awake," I said. He stopped mid-step. "Talking," I added. "Doctor says she's going to make a full recovery." There it was, just for a fraction of a second, a flicker behind his eyes. Not relief, not gratitude, calculation, like someone watching a number change on a screen and trying to figure out what it means for the rest of the equation. Lindsay forced a smile beside him. That's wonderful news, Warren." I nodded once, then I said it. "The police are on their way." No build-up, no shift in tone, just a statement. Preston's face drained so fast it almost looked unreal. "What?" He said. I didn't raise my voice. "Margaret filed everything this morning," I said. "Bank records, pharmacy footage, the call you made to the estate attorney pretending to be Cassandra's assistant, Dr. Nash's report. It's all been handed over." Lindsay made a small sound, barely there, but it was enough. Preston stepped closer. "Dad, just listen for a second, okay? I can explain." I held up one hand. That was all it took. "There is nothing you can say," I said quietly. "Not one sentence in the English language that covers this." He opened his mouth again, closed it. For the first time since I'd seen him that week, he looked unsure. I glanced at the flowers in his hand. "Those are nice," I said. "She'll appreciate them." Then I met his eyes again. From someone else. No yelling, no scene, just the end of the conversation. And for the first time, he looked like a man who understood that whatever he thought he had control over was gone. They were arrested in the hospital parking lot. Margaret had arranged it that way. Timing matters in situations like this, not for drama, but for clarity. No confusion about where anyone stood, no private conversations, no room to shift the story before it settled. I watched it happen from the window at the end of the corridor. Preston was still holding the flowers. That's the detail that stayed with me. 2 officers approached them just as they stepped off the curb. Calm, professional, no raised voices. One of them said something I couldn't hear. Preston responded. Of course he did. He's always believed his voice could fix things. Even from a distance, I could see it. The posture, the leaning forward, the attempt to explain. Lindsay didn't say a word. She stood still, hands at her sides, like she'd already skipped ahead to the part where cooperation becomes strategy. Kurt stepped up beside me. I hadn't even heard him arrive. He just appeared. That's what he does when things matter. We stood there in silence for a moment, watching. "They're not fighting it," he said quietly. "No," I replied. "They know what's coming." Preston turned once, looking back toward the hospital entrance. I don't know what he expected to see, me maybe. I didn't move. The officers guided them toward the car. No struggle, no resistance, just the slow, heavy movement of people who had run out of options. Kurt exhaled. "How do you feel?" I thought about it. Not the easy answer. The honest one. "Like I just watched my own life split in half," I said. "Like I aged 10 years in 5 days. He nodded. "And Cassandra?" I looked down the hallway toward her room. The door was slightly open. I could see the edge of the bed, the monitor light flickering softly. "She's still here," I said. That's what matters. And it did. Because justice doesn't feel the way people think it does. There's no relief that washes over you, no sense of victory, just a quiet understanding that something has been settled and something else will never be the same again. Cassandra came home 3 months later. It was a Saturday morning in early October, the kind where the light comes in soft through the windows and makes everything look a little better than it actually is. I stood by the doorway while she walked in slowly, one hand trailing along the wall like she was reacquainting herself with the place. She stopped in the hallway, looked around, not dramatically, just carefully, like she was taking inventory of a life she almost didn't get to come back to. Then she turned to me and said, "Warren, the kitchen needs repainting." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Absolutely not," I said. "I just painted it 2 years ago." She narrowed her eyes at the wall. "That is not white," she said. "That is bureaucratic apology beige." I looked at the wall, looked at her, then I pulled out my phone. "Yeah," I said. "I'll call someone." That was Cassandra. No matter what she'd been through, she came back exactly as herself. The trial came and went. 11 days. Jury didn't take long. The evidence didn't leave much room for interpretation. I sat beside Cassandra when the verdict was read. She didn't flinch, just held my hand a little tighter. We didn't talk about Preston on the drive home. Some things don't need to be said out loud to be understood. That night we ordered Thai food, sat at our own kitchen table, no laptops, no distractions, just quiet. And I thought about that Tuesday, about the moment I walked into that house and felt something was wrong. Here's the truth. You can't control what people choose to become. Not even your own child. All you can control is what you do when the lights come on. I walked in, I paid attention, and I didn't look away. If this story stayed with you, hit like, share your thoughts below, and subscribe. Because you're not the only one who's had to learn something like this the hard way.